Mom, I've enclosed a check to cover what you spent on my education. Consider this payment in full. I won't be needing you at the ceremony. Marcus. Clara Bennett's hands trembled as she held the cream-colored envelope, her name written in Marcus's careful handwriting across the front. For a moment, her heart soared. Finally, an invitation to her son's medical school graduation. After 26 years of single motherhood, countless double shifts at the diner, and sacrificing every dream she'd ever had, she would finally see him walk across that stage. She tore open the envelope with eager fingers, but the words inside made her sink into the worn kitchen chair she'd owned since Marcus was 5. Mom, I've enclosed a check to cover what you spent on my education. Consider this payment in full. I won't be needing you at the ceremony. Marcus. The check fluttered to the linoleum floor. $50,000, more money than Clara had seen in years, but it felt like a slap across her weathered face. She stared at the kitchen where she'd helped him with homework every night, where she'd served him breakfast before school, even when there was barely enough for both of them. The refrigerator still held his report cards, honor roll certificates, and acceptance letters, all the achievements she'd celebrated alone, while he grew more distant with each success. 26 years old, Dr. Marcus Reynolds now. He'd legally changed his surname 3 years ago, claiming he wanted to build his own identity. The hurt had never quite healed. Clara picked up the phone and dialed his number, her heart hammering against her ribs. Marcus Reynolds speaking. His voice was professional, cold. Marcus, sweetheart, I got your letter. It's Dr. Reynolds, Mom, and it's not a letter, it's a business transaction. Business transaction? Clara's voice cracked. Baby, I'm your mother. I raised you. I gave you everything. You gave me guilt, manipulation, and a constant reminder of how much I owed you. Every sacrifice was thrown in my face like a weapon. I worked 3 jobs for you, Marcus. I never dated anyone because of you, Marcus. I have nothing because I gave it all to you, Marcus. Well, now you have $50,000. We're even. The line went quiet, except for Clara's ragged breathing. Even? Son, love isn't a debt to be paid off. Love? Marcus's laugh was better. Is that what you call making me responsible for your every unhappiness? Making me feel guilty for succeeding? I'm getting married next month, Mom, to someone who celebrates my achievements instead of making them about her sacrifices. Married? The word came out as a whisper. I don't even know her name. Isabella. Dr. Isabella Hayes. And you won't be meeting her. Marcus, please. The dial tone echoed through the empty kitchen. Clara sat in the gathering darkness, memories flooding back like a broken dam. She remembered the night she'd found out she was pregnant, 19 years old, abandoned by Marcus's father the moment he learned about the baby. Her own parents had disowned her, calling her a disgrace. She'd had nothing but fierce determination and an unborn child who needed her. Those early years were a blur of exhaustion and love, working at the diner during the day, cleaning offices at night, studying for her GED while Marcus slept in a basket beside her textbooks. She dreamed of becoming a teacher, but that dream died the night she had to drop out of community college because she couldn't afford both tuition and Marcus's daycare. Every sacrifice had felt worth it when she saw his bright eyes light up over a new book, when he scored the winning goal in Little League, when he graduated valedictorian from high school. But somewhere along the way, her pride in his achievements had become tangled with her own lost dreams. Maybe she had leaned too heavily on his success to validate her choices. She thought about the fights that had grown more frequently as he prepared for college, how she'd cried when he'd chosen a school 3 states away, how she'd called him every day until he asked her to stop, how she'd shown up to his apartment unannounced during his sophomore year, finding him embarrassed to introduce her to his polished, wealthy classmates. "You smother me," he'd said that day. "Everything is about you, your sacrifice, your pain, your needs. When do I get to just be proud of myself without carrying your baggage?" She'd been hurt, defensive. Baggage. Is that what I am now? Your need for validation through my success is baggage. Maybe he'd been right. Maybe in her desperation to matter, to feel like her sacrifices meant something, she'd made his accomplishments about her instead of about him. But $50,000? As if their relationship was a business loan to be repaid? 3 states away, Dr. Isabella Hayes found her fiancé staring out their apartment window, his jaw clenched in the way that meant he was fighting with himself. "She called again?" Isabella asked gently, setting down her medical journals. Marcus turned to her, this brilliant man she'd fallen in love with, and she saw the confusion and pain he tried so hard to hide. I settled beside him on the couch they'd picked out together, studying his face. In the 2 years they'd been together, Marcus had never once spoken fondly of his mother. Every mention was tinged with resentment and obligation. "Tell me about your childhood," she said quietly. "You know about my childhood. Single mother, we were poor, she worked constantly." His voice was clipped. "No, Marcus. Tell me about you in your childhood. What made you happy?" He was quiet for a long moment. "She used to read to me every night. Even when she was dead tired from work, she'd do all the voices for the characters." His voice softened despite himself. "And she never missed a game, a play, a science fair, ever, even if it meant losing pay. She sounds devoted." She was suffocating. The hardness returned to his voice. Everything was about her sacrifice. I couldn't enjoy anything without being reminded what it cost her. Isabella chose her next words carefully. What if she wasn't trying to guilt you? What if she was just proud, and maybe scared that you'd forget her once you succeeded? Marcus looked at her sharply. "Whose side are you on?" "Yours. Always yours. But Marcus, you're marrying me without your mother there, without her even knowing my name. Doesn't that feel wrong to you? She'll just find something wrong with you, or the wedding, or me. She always does." Isabella took his hands in hers. "I've never heard you talk about her visiting your apartment, or calling too much, or being demanding. I've heard you say she was always working, always present, always supportive. The only thing I've heard that sounds truly difficult is that she talked about her sacrifices. And maybe that's because they were real and significant, and she was processing them out loud instead of hiding them." Marcus pulled away. "You don't understand. Then help me understand. Because the man I love is kind and generous and empathetic with everyone, except the woman who raised him. And I can't figure out why." That night, Marcus couldn't sleep. Isabella's words echoed in his mind. And for the first time in years, he allowed himself to really remember. He remembered being 8 years old with a fever, and his mother staying home from work to care for him, making him soup and reading stories until he fell asleep. He'd heard her crying on the phone later, begging her boss not to fire her. He remembered the Christmas when he was 12 and desperately wanted a guitar. They couldn't afford it, but Christmas morning, there it was under their tiny tree. Years later, he'd found the pawn shop receipt in her jewelry box. She'd sold her grandmother's ring. He remembered high school graduation, seeing her in the audience crying with joy, wearing the same dress she'd worn to every special occasion because it was the only nice one she owned. When had those memories become overshadowed by resentment? When had her expressions of love started feeling like chains? Maybe it was when I started to understand the weight of her sacrifices, when I realized that her entire life had been shaped around him, and that scared him. What if I failed? What if I wasn't worth it? What if I could never be enough to justify what she'd given up? It was easier to be angry than to live with that pressure. He thought about the women he dated in college, all from families with money, parents who had careers and identities beyond their children. He'd been embarrassed by his mother's worn clothes, her grammatical errors, her stories about the diner. He'd been ashamed of being ashamed. And then he'd met Isabella. Brilliant, accomplished Isabella, whose parents were both doctors, who'd never known want or insecurity. She'd made him feel worthy of success, like he belonged in the world he'd fought so hard to enter. But Isabella was right. He was marrying the love of his life, and his mother didn't even know her name. The next morning, Marcus called in sick to the hospital and sat down at his computer. He typed and deleted for hours. Finally, he managed. "Mom, I'm sorry about yesterday. I'm sorry about the money. I'm sorry about a lot of things. I'm getting married on June 15th to Dr. Isabella Hayes. She's a pediatric surgeon, and she's kind and funny, and she makes me want to be better. I'd like you to meet her. I'd like you to come to the wedding. I'd like you to walk me down the aisle, if you're willing. I know that's usually the bride's thing, but I've been thinking about how you were both mother and father to me, and it seems right. I know I've hurt you. I know I've been ungrateful. I was so afraid of disappointing you that I convinced myself you were the problem instead of facing my own fears. I love you. I've always loved you. I'm proud to be your son. If you're willing to give me another chance, Isabella and I would like to drive down this weekend. If not, I understand. Your son, Marcus Bennett Reynolds." He added his mother's maiden name to his signature before he could change his mind, then hit send before his courage failed. Clara read the email 17 times before she believed it was real. Then she cried for 20 minutes, cleaned the house from top to bottom, and called in sick to the diner for the first time in 3 years. Saturday arrived gray and drizzling. Clara stood at her kitchen window, watching for Marcus's car and trying to quiet her racing heart. When the silver sedan pulled up, she saw him emerge first, taller than she remembered, wearing a sweater she'd never seen. Then a woman stepped out of the passenger side. Isabella was beautiful in a quiet way, with dark hair pulled back and an uncertain smile. She carried flowers, yellow roses, Clara's favorites. How could she have known? The knock on the door came soft and hesitant. Clara opened it to find her son looking nervous and young despite his 26 years. "Hi, Mom." "Hi, sweetheart." They stood there for a moment, neither sure how to bridge the gap of hurt and time. Then Isabella stepped forward. "Mrs. Bennett, I'm Isabella. I've heard so much about you." Clara looked between them, seeing how Isabella's hand rested supportively on Marcus's back, how she stepped slightly forward when he seemed frozen. This woman was protecting him, even from his own mother. "Please come in, and it's Clara. I hope Marcus has told you good things. He told me you read him The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe so many times you both had it memorized," Isabella said with a warm smile. Marcus shot Isabella a grateful look. "I brought photo albums," he said quietly, "from when I was little. I thought maybe you could show Isabella. Tell her the stories." Clara's eyes filled with tears. "I'd love that." They spent the afternoon on Clara's worn couch, photo albums spread between them. Clara told stories Marcus had forgotten, how he'd insisted on wearing his Superman cape to the grocery store for an entire year, how he'd tried to teach their cat to read, how he'd cried when she'd explained they couldn't keep the stray dog he'd befriended. "He was such a tender-hearted little boy," Clara said, showing Isabella a picture of 5-year-old Marcus banditing a stuffed animal. "Always trying to fix everything, make everything better. He's still like that." Isabella said softly, looking at Marcus with such love that Clara felt something tight in her chest finally relax. As the day wore on, they found their rhythm. Marcus made coffee the way Clara had taught him years ago. Isabella helped with dinner, listening as Clara shared family recipes and stories. And slowly, carefully, they began to talk about the harder things. "I was so scared," Clara admitted as they sat around her small kitchen table. Scared that once you made it, once you had the life you deserved, you'd realize you didn't need me anymore. Marcus reached across the table and took her hand. Mom, I was scared too. Scared that I could never be successful enough to justify what you gave up. Scared that I'd disappoint you. It was easier to be angry than to live with that pressure. I never wanted you to feel pressured. I wanted you to feel loved. I did feel loved. I felt so loved, it terrified me. Isabella watched them, these two people who loved each other so much they'd nearly destroyed their relationship trying to prove it. Marcus told me about the guitar, she said quietly. The Christmas when you sold your ring. Clara looked surprised. You remembered that? I remember everything, Marcus said. The soup when I was sick, staying up all night when I had nightmares, driving me to baseball practice in that car that barely ran. I remember all of it, Mom. I got scared of remembering. And I got scared of being forgotten, whispered Clara. They cried then, all three of them, for the years of misunderstanding and the pain they'd caused each other. June 15th dawned bright and clear. Clara stood in the mirror of her hotel room, wearing a dress Isabella had helped her pick out. Nothing too fancy, but beautiful and new. She'd never owned anything so lovely. The wedding was small, held in Isabella's parents' garden. Clara had worried about meeting them, these successful doctors who'd given their daughter everything Clara had dreamed of giving Marcus. But Dr. Patricia Hayes had embraced her warmly. Isabella told us about you, she'd said, about how you raised Marcus alone, put him through school. As a mother, I can't imagine doing what you did. You should be so proud. Clara had cried a little then, overwhelmed by the acceptance she'd never expected to find. Now, as she walked toward the garden where her son waited, Clara felt a peace she hadn't known in years. Marcus stood at the altar in his father's suit, the one piece of him she'd kept, looking nervous and happy and impossibly handsome. When the music started, Clara took her place at Marcus's side. The walk down the aisle was short, but it felt like a journey through all their years together. The struggles, the love, the mistakes, the forgiveness. Who gives this man to be married? The official asked. Clara looked up at her son, this man she'd raised, who'd become someone she was proud to know. He gives himself, she said clearly, but he takes with him all my love and blessings. Marcus squeezed her hand before she stepped back, and Clara saw Isabella smile at her through her tears. Epilogue, new beginnings. 6 months later, Clara stood in the doorway of her new apartment. It was small but bright, with a window overlooking a park where children played. The money Marcus had tried to give her had been returned long ago, but he and Isabella had insisted on helping her move somewhere nicer, closer to them. Her phone buzzed with a text from Isabella. Dinner Sunday, Marcus is making his famous, terrible lasagna. Clara laughed, typing back, I'll bring salad, and maybe teach him how to make decent lasagna. The response came quickly. He'd love that. We both would. Clara looked around her new home, with its photos of Marcus from every stage of his life, the shelf of books they'd read together, the yellow roses Isabella brought every week. On her kitchen table sat a letter from Marcus. He'd started writing to her regularly, sharing his thoughts and memories and dreams for the future. The latest letter had ended with words that Clara would treasure forever. Thank you for showing me what it means to love without conditions, even when I was too scared to accept it. Thank you for never giving up on us. As Clara watched the sun set through her window, she thought about second chances, and the courage it takes to love someone enough to let them hurt you, and to keep loving them even when they do. Her phone rang, and Marcus's name appeared on the screen. Hi, sweetheart, she said, settling into her comfortable chair. Hi, Mom. Isabella and I have some news. Clara smiled, ready for whatever came next. They were a family again. Imperfect, complicated, but whole. And that was enough. That was everything. The story of Clara and Marcus was far from over. There would be grandchildren to spoil, holidays to celebrate, and years of rebuilding trust and creating new memories. But for now, in this moment, they had found their way back to each other. And sometimes that's the most beautiful ending of all, the promise of a new beginning.